Before we dive into the hidden wisdom encoded in your birth journey, imagine this. The moment of your conception wasn't just biological, it was cosmic. The same patterns that governed the formation of stars and galaxies were mirrored in your development from single cell to conscious being. Ancient mystics discovered this connection millennia ago, and their profound understanding of embryonic development reveals secrets about our universal origins that modern science is only beginning to comprehend. What if the most profound secrets of the universe were encoded in the 9 months before your birth? What if the ancient alchemists, Taoist masters, and Kabbalistic sages weren't just creating metaphysical theories, but had discovered a profound truth about human development that modern embryology is only beginning to confirm? In those first moments of your existence, when you were nothing more than a single fertilized cell, something miraculous was already unfolding. A process so perfectly orchestrated that it mirrors the very creation of the cosmos itself. The ancient traditions knew this. They observed the patterns of development and recognized something profound. The embryo's journey is not just biological. It's the universe's greatest spiritual teaching encoded in flesh and blood. I invite you, fellow traveler of consciousness, to journey with me beyond the veil of ordinary perception. Together, we'll explore how the ancient wisdom traditions understood the embryonic process as a sacred template, a cosmic blueprint that reveals the very nature of creation itself. This understanding isn't just academic. It holds transformative power for your spiritual awakening today. In the next 30 minutes, we'll unveil how Taoist masters cultivated the spiritual embryo within themselves, how Kabbalistic sages mapped the divine emanations onto fetal development, and how alchemists saw in the growing embryo the perfect microcosm of universal creation. More importantly, you'll discover practical techniques to reconnect with your own embryonic consciousness, the state of perfect communion with the cosmic whole that you once experienced. The study of embryology and the development of the embryo exists in virtually every major civilization and spiritual tradition throughout history. But there's a profound difference between how these traditions approach this subject and how we understand it today. For the ancient Taoists, embryonic development wasn't merely a physical process, but a template for spiritual cultivation. The 5th century CE Chinese Buddhist concept of Sheng Tai, a syncretic metaphor for achieving Buddhist liberation or Taoist transcendence, drew directly from observations of the developing fetus. This wasn't just poetic language. It was a profound recognition that the patterns of embryonic growth contained wisdom about spiritual evolution. In the Jewish mystical tradition of Kabbalah, the formation of the embryo was understood as a recapitulation of divine creation itself. As we find in ancient rabbinic literature, the embryo takes 40 days to attain recognizable human form, a time frame that mirrors the biblical 40 days of transformation found throughout sacred texts. The Kabbalists saw in these 40 days a reflection of the cosmic process by which divine energy manifests in the material world. But here lies our modern dilemma. We've separated biological understanding from spiritual wisdom. We study embryology as pure science, divorced from its deeper meaning. In doing so, we've lost connection with a profound truth that our own formation in the womb contains the very template of cosmic creation. The promise of esoteric embryology is this: by understanding and reconnecting with the wisdom encoded in our prenatal development, we can awaken to our true nature as microcosms of the universe itself. The ancient sages didn't just theorize about this. They developed practical methods to reconnect with this embryonic consciousness, techniques we can still access today to transform our spiritual understanding. Our journey will take us through 3 profound dimensions of esoteric embryology. First, we'll explore the Taoist understanding of the spiritual embryo, and how masters cultivated this state through specific breathing and meditation practices. Next, we'll delve into the Kabbalistic mapping of divine emanations onto embryonic development, revealing how spiritual consciousness evolves through distinct stages. Finally, we'll examine how alchemical traditions viewed the embryo as the perfect laboratory for understanding cosmic transmutation. Throughout this exploration, we'll discover surprising parallels between ancient wisdom and modern embryological science connections that suggest these ancient seers had insights into human development that transcended their technological capabilities. Most importantly, you'll learn practical techniques for reconnecting with your own embryonic consciousness as a pathway to deeper spiritual awakening. The concept of the embryo as a spiritual metaphor reaches back thousands of years across multiple traditions. Let's begin with the Taoist understanding, which is perhaps the most developed system of embryonic spirituality. In Taoist internal alchemy, known as Naidan, practitioners seek to cultivate what is called the spiritual embryo, or sun toy, Shen Tai. This isn't merely poetic language. It represents a specific state of consciousness that can be developed through dedicated practice. As explained in the Taoist tradition, the spiritual embryo looks like a ball of light which floats in midair in the pre-heaven dimension. And they are like little satellites which help to connect the creation to your heart and your heart to the UN Sun. The formation of this spiritual embryo follows a specific process that mirrors physical gestation. It begins with what Taoists call the three treasures: Jing, essence; Qi, vitality; and Shen, spirit. As described in Taoist texts, Jing refines Qi and regulates its use by the organs. In the lower Dantian, energy center, abundant Qi is transformed into Shen in the middle Dantian, and Shen is cultivated into Wu Wei in the upper Dantian. This process describes a refinement of energy that parallels embryonic development. Just as physical embryos develop through distinct stages of cellular differentiation, the spiritual embryo develops through the transmutation of increasingly refined energies. A key practice in this tradition is Taixi, or embryonic breathing. As described in ancient texts, embryo breathing in Qigong is called turtle breathing. In the most quiet state, Yang energy stream starts to produce a kind of breathing turtle breathing, embryo breathing, from Dantian to take the place of lungs function. This practice attempts to recreate the direct energetic nourishment experienced by the fetus in the womb, bypassing ordinary respiration. The Taoist tradition maintains that the true Chinese Qigong is the so-called no-death, continuous life method that is the change of turtle living mode. Humankind has the nature of continuous life, turtle breathing or embryo breathing. What a pity is that it exists before birth. Once being born, the congenital organism's habits begin to the body. Through embryonic breathing, practitioners seek to reconnect with this original state of vitality and longevity. In parallel to this Taoist understanding, the Kabbalistic tradition offers equally profound insights into embryonic development. According to Kabbalah, Zeir Anpin develops through three states of consciousness: fetal, Eber, suckling, Yenika, and mature, Gadlut. Similarly, every soul develops through these states of consciousness. These three states correspond to different ways of receiving spiritual nourishment. In the fetal state, consciousness is entirely receptive and nourished directly through a higher source. In the suckling state, consciousness begins to participate actively in its own nourishment while still depending on a higher source. In the mature state, consciousness can nourish itself independently. The first profound revelation of esoteric embryology is that the embryo's development follows precisely the pattern of cosmic creation itself. This isn't merely symbolic. It reflects a fundamental principle expressed in the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, as below, so above. In Taoist understanding, human embryonic development begins with what they call prenatal Jing, which is passed to you by your ancestors at conception and is stored in the kidneys. It is a finite resource that cannot be replenished. This corresponds to the cosmological concept of Yuan Qi, Yuan Qio, the primordial energy that existed before the division of yin and yang at the beginning of creation. Just as the universe began from an undifferentiated state and gradually formed into distinct structures, the human embryo begins as a single cell that differentiates into increasingly complex structures. The Taoists observed this parallel and created practices to reverse this process to return from differentiation to unity. Similarly, Kabbalistic tradition maps embryonic development onto the divine emanations of creation. According to Kabbalah, after that, the embryo takes 9 months to develop its own 9 sephirot in Malchut, from Nefesh of Nefesh, Keter of Malchut, to Yekida of Nefesh, Malchut of Malchut. These 9 sephirot represent stages of divine manifestation, from the most subtle to the most concrete. What's remarkable is how these ancient understandings align with modern embryology. Science now confirms that embryonic development follows distinct stages that mirror evolutionary history, from single-celled organisms to complex vertebrates. As one scientific paper notes, at the point of implantation, signaling events between the embryo and mother, and between the embryonic and extraembryonic compartments of the embryo itself, orchestrate a total reorganization of the embryo, coupled with a burst of cell proliferation. This mirrors the Taoist and Kabbalistic understanding of developmental jumps between distinct states of organization. The most profound insight here is that these ancient traditions weren't just making poetic analogies. They were recognizing a fundamental pattern that connects embryonic development to cosmic creation. This pattern isn't just theoretical, it's practical. By understanding these developmental stages, we can understand our own spiritual evolution and the processes needed to progress from one stage to another. Consider this. If embryonic development follows the pattern of cosmic creation, then by reconnecting with our embryonic consciousness, we can access direct understanding of cosmic origins. This is the foundation of many mystical practices across traditions. The attempt to return to an undifferentiated state of consciousness that existed before our individual identity formed. As we delve deeper into esoteric embryology, we encounter increasingly profound mysteries about the nature of consciousness itself. One of the most fascinating aspects is how these different traditions understood the moment when consciousness first enters the developing embryo. In the Taoist tradition, consciousness isn't something that suddenly appears at a specific developmental stage. It's present from the very beginning, but undergoes transformation through what they call internal alchemy. According to Taoist texts, this process involves the anthropomorphization of cosmic principles within the body, the combination of multiple cosmological models, and the use of cosmogonic reversal as a template for practice. In other words, the embryo's development isn't just physical. It's a cosmological process happening within the body. Similarly, Kabbalistic tradition speaks of different levels of soul entering the embryo at different stages. According to one Kabbalistic text, at the state represented in Figure 65, when the third furrows are well established but extend only a short distance from their respective points of origin, the first cleavage furrow has reached the lower pole, where its ends unite. The first cleavage furrow thus becomes superficially complete, thereby establishing the holoblastic character of the egg. While this appears to be a scientific description, for Kabbalists, These physical changes correspond to spiritual developments, the entrance of increasingly complex levels of the soul. What's particularly fascinating is how these traditions understood embryonic consciousness not as something to be left behind, but as something to be reclaimed. In Taoism, this is exemplified by the practice of embryonic breathing, Taixi, which attempts to recreate the direct energetic nourishment experienced by the fetus in the womb, according to Taoist texts. Taixi, Tai Chi, embryonic breathing or embryonic respiration, refers to Taoist meditation and Neidan inner alchemy methods, the principle of which is to breathe like an embryo or fetus in the womb, without using nose or mouth. This practice recognizes that the embryo in the womb doesn't breathe through lungs, but receives oxygen directly through the placenta, a much more efficient and direct form of energetic exchange than post-birth breathing. But here emerges a profound paradox. In both Taoist and Kabbalistic traditions, the goal isn't just to return to an embryonic state, it's to integrate embryonic consciousness with mature awareness. As one text explains, in a state of infancy, we can already make requests and have a dialogue with the Creator. After 2 years of infancy, we need the guidance and education of the Creator and can receive some light of wisdom. In other words, spiritual evolution requires both regression to embryonic unity and progression to mature wisdom. This paradox points to one of the deepest mysteries of spiritual development: the simultaneous movement both back toward origin and forward toward fulfillment. The embryo represents both our beginning and the template for our ultimate potential. Modern embryology has discovered that the embryo contains all the genetic information needed for full development from the moment of conception. Similarly, these esoteric traditions suggest that our spiritual potential is fully present from our origin. Our spiritual journey isn't about acquiring something new, but about manifesting what was already encoded within us from the beginning. How can we integrate these profound insights about esoteric embryology into our daily spiritual practice? The ancient traditions offer specific techniques that allow us to reconnect with embryonic consciousness while maintaining mature awareness. The first and perhaps most fundamental practice is embryonic breathing, Taixi. Unlike normal breathing, which uses the lungs, embryonic breathing attempts to recreate the direct energetic exchange experienced in the womb. According to Taoist texts, this involves breathing from Dan Taiyan to take the place of lung function to push forward the whole body circulations of blood and energy stream. To practice embryonic breathing, begin by sitting in meditation and bringing your awareness to your lower abdomen, the lower Dan Taiyan. As you inhale, imagine breath entering not through your nose or mouth, but directly through your navel, the original point of nourishment in the womb. Allow your breath to become increasingly subtle until it feels as if you're not breathing at all. Yet, energy is still circulating throughout your body. This practice directly connects to the Taoist understanding that Tang Dynasty, 618-907, Taoist internal alchemists fundamentally changed the nature and understanding of embryonic breathing from the ancient theory of Wai Qi, external qi of the air, external breathing, to the new theory of Nei Qi, internal qi of one's organs, internal breathing. Rather than focusing on external air, focus on the internal circulation of energy already present within you. Another powerful practice comes from the Kabbalistic tradition, which involves meditating on the developmental stages of consciousness. As explained in Kabbalistic texts, consciousness develops through stages of fetal Eibur, suckling Yenika, and mature Gadlut. By contemplating these stages, we can recognize where our own spiritual development may be incomplete or imbalanced. For this practice, begin by meditating on the fetal state. a state of complete receptivity where you are nourished directly by a higher source without any effort of your own. Allow yourself to experience this state of pure receiving. Then shift your awareness to the suckling state, where you actively participate in receiving nourishment while still depending on a higher source. Finally, contemplate the mature state, where you can nourish yourself independently yet choose to remain connected to the higher source. A third practice combines elements from both traditions and focuses on cultivating the spiritual embryo, or sacred embryo, Sheng Tai. According to Taoist texts, this embryo is formed when you believe you can create it without needing any evidence. Then, you need to have the desire, which is when you want to create it. Last, you would need hope and vision, which is the vision of the future from this creation. For this practice, visualize a luminous sphere forming in your lower abdomen. Into this sphere, project your deepest spiritual aspiration, your sincere desire for transformation, and your clear vision of the future that would result from this transformation. As you breathe, imagine this sphere growing brighter and more substantial with each breath, eventually becoming an energetic embryo that radiates throughout your entire being. These practices aren't just metaphorical. They're designed to activate specific energetic processes within the body that parallel embryonic development. As one text explains, this process describes a refinement of energy that parallels embryonic development. Just as physical embryos develop through distinct stages of cellular differentiation, the spiritual embryo develops through the transmutation of increasingly refined energies. By engaging in these practices regularly, we begin to reconnect with the wisdom encoded in our original development. We recover aspects of consciousness that were present in our embryonic state, but became dormant through the process of birth and individuation. Most importantly, we begin to recognize our own development as a microcosm of cosmic creation, a recognition that fundamentally transforms our relationship with the universe itself. When we fully integrate the wisdom of esoteric embryology, we arrive at a transcendent perspective that fundamentally transforms our understanding of ourselves and the cosmos. This perspective reveals that the boundary between microcosm and macrocosm, between our individual development and cosmic evolution, is ultimately an illusion. The ancient Taoist masters recognize that the patterns governing celestial bodies are mirrored in our psychological landscape. This isn't just poetic metaphor. It's a recognition of a fundamental fractal pattern that repeats at all scales of existence. Your embryonic development literally recapitulates the cosmic process of creation. Consider this profound insight. Modern embryology has confirmed that human embryos go through developmental stages that mirror evolutionary history from simple cell to complex organism. This scientific observation aligns perfectly with the ancient understanding that embryonic development follows the pattern of cosmic creation. But the transcendent perspective goes beyond mere observation of parallels. It recognizes that these parallels exist because, at the deepest level, the embryo and the cosmos are not separate realities, but different manifestations of the same underlying pattern. As above, so below. As within, so without. This recognition has profound implications for our spiritual journey. If our embryonic development contains the pattern of cosmic creation, then by reconnecting with our embryonic consciousness, we can directly experience the process of cosmic creation within ourselves. This is why traditions across the world have developed practices to reconnect with embryonic states of consciousness. The Kabbalistic tradition expresses this through the concept that the Creator sends us obstructions on purpose, so that we will begin to want to approach Him through our efforts. Just as embryonic development involves overcoming challenges to achieve new stages of growth, our spiritual development requires facing obstacles that ultimately lead to transformation. Similarly, Taoist tradition speaks of cosmogonic reversal as a template for practice, suggesting that spiritual cultivation involves reversing the process of differentiation to return to original unity. This doesn't mean abandoning individuality, but rather recognizing that individuality itself emerges from and remains connected to the undifferentiated whole. The most profound aspect of this transcendent perspective is the recognition that our embryonic origins aren't just in the past. They're continuously present as the foundation of our being. As one text states, the most profound aspect of the transcendent perspective is the recognition that our embryonic origins aren't just in the past. They're continuously present as the foundation of our being. This continuous presence of our origins means that spiritual transformation isn't about becoming something different from what we are. It's about remembering and manifesting what we've always been from the beginning. The embryo already contains everything needed for full development. Similarly, our spiritual potential is fully present from our origin. When we truly integrate this understanding, we transcend the conventional boundaries of time and space. We recognize that the 9 months of our embryonic development weren't just a biological process that happened long ago. They were the cosmic process of creation manifesting through us, a process that continues to unfold in every moment of our existence. As we conclude our journey through the mystical science of human development, we arrive at a profound invitation to recognize and reclaim our embryonic consciousness as a pathway to cosmic understanding. The wisdom traditions we've explored, Taoist, Kabbalistic, and alchemical, all point to the same fundamental truth. The patterns of your embryonic development contain encoded wisdom about the nature of creation itself. By reconnecting with these patterns, you can access direct experiential knowledge of cosmic processes that transcend intellectual understanding. This isn't merely theoretical, it's intensely practical. The embryonic breathing practices of Taoism, the developmental contemplations of Kabbalah, and the spiritual embryo cultivation techniques we've explored are all designed to activate this remembrance. Through these practices, you can begin to experience yourself not as separate from the cosmic process, but as a living embodiment of it. As you integrate this week's teaching, I invite you to spend time each day in silent meditation, bringing your awareness to your navel, your original point of connection to Source. Feel the echo of that primordial connection still present within you. Allow your breathing to become increasingly subtle until you sense the embryonic circulation of energy that has been present since your conception. Pay attention to how this practice affects your perception of yourself and your relationship with the world around you. Notice how reconnecting with embryonic consciousness dissolves the sense of separation between yourself and the cosmos. In our next journey together, we'll explore how these embryonic patterns manifest in the cycles of death and rebirth. Not just physical death and rebirth, but the continuous cycles of transformation that occur throughout our lives. Until then, I invite you to continue exploring the mystery of your own origins, recognizing that the story of your embryonic development is nothing less than the story of cosmic creation itself. Remember, fellow traveler, you weren't just born into this universe, the universe was born through you. Your embryonic journey wasn't just biological, it was cosmic. And the wisdom encoded in that journey remains accessible within you, waiting to be remembered.